So then we are going to start this next part. So that is reading from Most Venerable Katukurunde Thero's Concept and Reality book. So I invite someone to read from where we have stopped. Actually, last week we couldn't complete the question and answers also. Probably someone you can start from where, probably a little bit before where we have stopped.
Yeah, we actually stopped halfway through the paragraph. So I'll start from the beginning, Bhante.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Hope you can see my screen, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thus, the main prong of attack is leveled at the concept of the soul as the controlling agent who is capable of experiencing happiness, which necessarily has to be permanent in order to be perfect. It is true that what gives rise to this notion is the idea of permanence or substantiality, but this latter is sufficiently rendered by the term nicha. The illusion of substantiality is linked with the psychological impulse for happiness, sukha, which in its turn sustain the illusion of the ego, atta. Now, the Madhyamika system often seems to stress this notion of substantiality underlying the illusion of an Atman, thereby giving an objective twist to the word. As already indicated, the word nature by itself does sufficient justice to this primary notion of substantiality, which originates at the cognitive level. In Sukha and Atha, we have the affective and conative reactions to the illusion of permanence. Hence, selfhood is to be found at the innermost conative impulses within the mind. It is not something out there in the material objects or in concepts for that matter. It is what we attribute to them or superimpose on them. Therefore, to believe that by merely demolishing concepts or theories, one can rise above them is to stop at the fringe of the problem. In coining the two expressions, Pudgalanairyatma and Dharmanairyatma, the Madhyamikas seems to have ignored the original significance of the term anatta. According to the early Buddhist point of view, there can be no basis for such distinction since the dharmas or elements, when they are regarded as being one's self or as belonging to one's self, would thereby become objects of his mind and part of his five aggregates. When it was said that one should look upon all dharmas as anatta, it only meant that one has to regard them as not being one's own self or a part thereof. Perhaps a better way to bring out the crux of the present argument would be to pose a question whether there will be any Dharmanairyatma left over to be realized when one has realized the so-called Pudgalanairyatma. It might, of course, be urged in mitigation that what gave rise to the above two expressions was the very dogmatic attitude of the Hinayanist in clinging to the dharmas. But this does not appear to be sufficient justification, since the dogmatic attitude of the Hinayanist is merely an indication that they have not grasped the full significance of the Nairyatma doctrine. If they had, they would no longer be dogmatic with regard to the dharmas, which are the objects of the sixth sense. In any case, this confusion as to the basic issues involved seem to have had its repercussions on the Madhyamika conception of sunyata. As against this, the conception of sunyata in the Pali Nikayas was always defined in relation to experience. Even when it is said that one should always look upon the word as void with mindfulness, it is to be taken as a step of training in detachment. However, as regard the experience of sunyata, one has to confirm the levels of sunyata described in the Chula Sunnata Sutta. We find
one moment, Saman. So please, can you go up?
Yeah.
So I think we can pay little attention to this explanation by Katukurunde Thero. related to what we call this Pudgala Nairatmya and the Dharma Nairatmya. So basically, we all are familiar with the kind of explanation in the Anatta teaching, what we call as Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. So we call Sabbe Sankhara Anicca, Sabbe Sankhara Dukkha, and then Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. So this is a very common statement, fairly popular statement, and we all are familiar with it. And Anatta, the non-self. And on the other hand, the emptiness. Emptiness is another thing that we already time to time discuss. So when one is going through one's vipassana practice, one is able to understand there is no self here, there is no person here, there is no being here, there is no I here. So then we come to a level like things are very much like empty of a self. So when Venerable Ananda asks, so what is this emptiness? Why it is called empty? Then Buddha deliberately, particularly mentioned, it is void of a self, and again it is void of what belongs to a self. Or it is empty of self and what belongs to a self. Empty of what belongs to a self. So that is the kind of definition we can find from in the early Buddhist teachings related to the emptiness. It is empty of a self, Atma, and again it is empty of what belongs to a self. Now these things we need to be a little clear, keep in our mind to progress. So in one sense, we can understand Buddha is talking about Sabbe Sankhara Anicca, Sabbe Sankhara Dukkha, and then he is talking about Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. All the Dhammas are coming under the Anatta. Now, why he didn't introduce Sabbe Sankhara Anatta? Instead, why he mentioned Sabbe Dhamma Anatta? So this is also a kind of an argument sometimes happening in the particularly in the academic circles. So some argue that Buddha wants to include all the Dhammas, including Nibbana. So that means mundane and supramundane, all Dhammas are meant when we are talking as Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. So therefore, when Sankhara is included, we are particularly pointing out the condition phenomena. So they are impermanent, they are unsatisfactory. But the Nibbana, we can say, is kind of a lasting happiness, a lasting satisfaction. So that's why we are saying it's a kind of a bliss. But on the other hand, is it Atma? Is it kind of a self? It is not. So that is also abandoned. So in a way, we need to highlight that Nibbana also not a self. It also does not belong to a self. So one argues, okay, this when saying Sabbe Dhamma Anatta, so it includes all the conditioned phenomena as well as the unconditioned, the Nibbana. So in general, therefore, everything is free of a self, void of a self, and what belongs to a self. And on the other hand, when one is practicing vipassana, so more one is understanding non-self, there's a possibility that one is not grasping anything belong to a self also, because one doesn't have a self. So one is not claiming anything belong to me now. So as a result of that, inner grasping as well as outside grasping is reduced. Ultimately, mind can get freed. So we say now mind is freed through this sunyata vimokha, opening or the kind of a door of freedom through emptiness. Probably you have heard that when one is practicing anicca, thoroughly understanding the impermanence, one is liberating, one is freeing through the animitta, signless state, because one is unable to grasp signs. On the other hand, when someone is thoroughly understanding the dukkha, the suffering aspect, one can say one is liberating through the desirelessness, what we call the appanhita vimokkamukha. On the other hand, when someone is practicing anatta, thoroughly understanding the anatta, non-self, his liberation happen, or his say temporary freedom happens through sunyata, that is the emptiness. So these are some information that we need to keep in our mind to understand the argument. Now, in the current discussion, Katakunda Thero particularly highlight now in the thesis done by Nagarjuna, that's the Madhyamika teaching. So they are introducing another concept called Pudgila Nairatme and Dharma Nairatme. So that means Anatta, the teaching of Anatta is very much like divided into two pieces. One is, one has to understand the Pudgila Nairatme, that means there is no person, no individual, no me, no I. But further one has to abandon the Dharma Nairatme, even the dharmas are free from a self, not belong to a self. So the Katakunda Thero argues, so this is something going over the rule like, so when someone is saying Sabbe Dhamma Anatta, it is already understood. So when someone is understanding the Anatta, so it includes both situations. He understands that at the personal level, at an individual level also things are impermanent. At the dharma level also things are, non-self. At the dharma level also things are non-self. So therefore, highlighting this as two things to separate understandings is very much like kind of an unnecessary introduction. So that is something that Katakunda Thero is trying to point out. So that is his argument. And then can you go a little down, Saman? Further down. Yeah. Now, when he is talking the emptiness, now when it comes to the early Buddhist teachings, the emptiness also not an absolute thing. Rather, it is a relative thing. Probably you can remember we were discussing certain aspects of that, considering this Chula Sunyata Sutta. So how Buddha is introducing the emptiness to the audience. So he's saying now we are in the Nigrodharama, Ubba, what's that, Purvarama, Migaramatu Pasada. So while we are here, it is empty of horses, it is empty of elephants, it is empty of kings, queens, ministers, whatever the hustle and bustle of the city, it's empty of that. But it is not empty of monks, it is not empty of maybe robes, maybe our other, say, monastic rules, it is not empty of that. So relatively, it is empty of something, at the same time, it is not empty of another thing. And then later he is talking another stage. Suppose now one is trying to meditate and he is trying to put his attention to the body. So while he is putting his attention to the body, then he can say, now mind is empty of that all city related stuff, where in that ancient city they have the horses, elephants, kings, queens, ministers. The mind is empty of that. Further, it is empty of whatever the monastery related, Migaramatu Pasada related stuff also, it is empty. Now you can't recognize any monks, robes or any other thing, because now your full attention is established in the body. So it is empty of all that, but it is not empty of body related phenomena. So that means there are some body sensations, there may be some aches, pains, etc. So you are fully aware of that. So that means you are not empty of that, but you are empty of all the other things. Now you can see the Buddha's argument here is that it is not he is taking or trying to take us to a kind of absolute emptiness. Rather, he is slowly, stage by stage, taking us to a relative emptiness. And later, now suppose you are practicing Dhatu Manasikara. So instead of paying attention to all four elements, suppose now you are paying attention to earth element only. Say you are recognizing hardness. So when you are establishing your attention on the hardness, that means the earth element. So you are empty of other three elements also. Also, you are empty of all the other monastery-related, Migaramadu, Pasada-related information as well. Also, you are empty of city-related, queens, ministers, kings, horses, elephants, that as well. But you are not empty of earth element, because that is your attention. So similarly, likewise, so Buddha is pointing out, when one becomes an arahant, so that is called the best kind of an emptiness. So that is the best type of emptiness. So even when you are in the best type of emptiness, Buddha now say, you don't have any defilements, any fetters related to the karmasrava, because you are free from karmasrava. Similarly, you don't have any defilements, any fetters, any kind of friction coming from the bhavasrava, the influx of being. That is also not there. And again, you don't have anything related to the avijjasrava, kind of an ignorance and feeling or sense of I, what belong to I, self-view. None of them are there, because now you are a keenasrava. Now you are in the arahantship. So any friction, any kind of perceptions happening due to these three asavas are not available. Therefore, you are in the sublime kind of emptiness, and you are in the supreme emptiness. But even there, you still handling this six sense body. So still some friction is coming through the body, because you are still a living being. You are still living. If something going wrong outside world, you may feel kind of a friction. If there are some raining happen, then you might feel it. If thundering happen, you might hear it. If someone is touching you, you might feel it. If someone is attacking, you might feel it. So even one becomes an arahant, it is also not the kind of an absolute emptiness, but rather it's also a relative emptiness. So therefore, stage by stage, Buddha is pointing out, even at the supreme type of emptiness, it is also a relative emptiness. So therefore, this is the type of understanding we need to keep in our mind. So when we are practicing vipassana, so therefore we shouldn't have a kind of a aim to abandon all different kinds of perceptions, all different kinds of cognitions, and utterly be unconscious. Because sometimes people have that kind of an extremist view. So when our mind or when our meditation to be successful, we should not feel anything. We should not be conscious on anything. We have to be completely unconscious. So that is actually taking the thing to a kind of an extreme. So here we can understand from the Chula Sunyata Sutta, Buddha is pointing out the supreme type of emptiness as the arahantship. And even in that emptiness, you still feel the friction coming from the six senses. So that is something that we need to recognize. And now we can proceed, Saman.
Yeah, Bhante. We find further illustration of this particular approach in the Sunyakata of the Patisambhida Magga, where 25 modes of voidness are enumerated and defined. Even the concept of sunya, for all its apparent similarity to sunyata of the Madhyamikas, merely implies the voidness as to selfhood in its specific application to the six senses. The principle of relativity in the determination of voidness may be seen all along in the list of definitions. The last, which is called Paramatta Sunya, is particularly significant in its formulation. As the highest stage of voidness, one would expect it to be termed an absolute devoid of relation to anything, but this is not so, and it still has relation to awareness, since the stage of voidness is called Sampajanassa Pavatta Paryadanam Sabba Sunyatanam Paramatta Sunyam, the highest of all forms of voidness, wherein one mindfully exhausts all existence. In view of the fact that this refers to the final attainment of parinibbana of the emancipated, one may regard this as a clear indication that the conception of sunyata in early Buddhism was always relative and experiential.
Yeah. Now, the other thing is that the point experiential. Now, this Jnananda Thero actually highlights that the point is experiential. So the emptiness is often, sometimes people talk in a more dogmatic way and a more theoretical way, and they are trying to take it to a more philosophical, theoretical, dogmatic level. But always the Buddha's teaching always has its ground based on the practicality. It's a practical experience that we are talking here. So the emptiness is not a mere concept. It is not a mere hypothetical state of the mind. Rather, it should be something that one has to attain, one has to experience. So therefore, we as practitioners, we need to understand, okay, this vipassana practice one day may reach me there or take me there. So the mind is free from a friction, free from something. So mind doesn't have any thoughts related to something. Mind doesn't have any perception related to something. So then I can safely say, so the mind is free or mind is empty of that. But I know still it is not empty of another thing. So likewise, by applying this principle to our own experience, our own practice, we can understand practically I am going towards the kind of an emptiness. Now, typically, at the beginning, what we have may be a kind of a cluttered mind, filled with so many things. Too much thinking, overthinking, too much attachments, burdened with so many responsibilities, maybe again and again going through a lot of mental images. We are often trapped in them. We often use them to prepare further stories, overthinking, proliferations. So the mind is not empty at all. But as a result of the practice, so it may have to lead us towards some sort of a relative emptiness. Still something may be there, but comparatively, it is less burdened, less hindered, less cluttered. Fair amount of clarity is there. At least time to time, some clarity is there. So often now I am experiencing some clarity. Often I am experiencing some lightness. So likewise, you can see the mind is now being purified. So the emptiness is also a kind of positive concept, because sometimes when we say emptiness, people might think, okay, this is, they are talking something kind of a hollow. No, so what's the point of having anything hollow? It has to be rich with something. So that's the way of our thinking. So is the emptiness completely hollow? Useless? No, actually the emptiness what Buddha is talking is something rich. So that's why he is telling that the best kind of an achievement, arahantship, is also a type of emptiness. It is free from all the frictions. It is free from all the kind of avidya, the ignorance, free from all the defilements, free from all the stresses, and is free from all the different kinds of wrong perceptions, selfhood. So all these different, problematic issues are not there. So mind is in the utter peace, stillness, calmness, clarity. So therefore emptiness has to be looked at with some new way, not merely paying attention to the typical connotation of the word. One has to take the emptiness in Buddhist type of this teaching of emptiness in a more positive way. It's a more rich state of mind, more balanced state of mind, more clear state of mind, more purified state of mind. So this more purified, more clear, no stress type of more balanced, more relaxed state of mind, one can say as an emptiness. So then maintaining such emptiness is more productive, more advantageous and more beneficial. So with such a mindset, we better approach, we better practice, and more than the emptiness happen, we start welcoming that. We start appreciating that. We don't question it, because that is our goal. To declutter the mind, to cleanse the mind, to clarify the mind, and to be free from all the defilements. So when mind is free from defilements, it's not a question, it is a solution. That is our aim, that is our goal. When unnecessary thinking is not available, it is a solution. We have come to a better solution now. Mind is not overthinking, so it is a better state. So when the mind is not cluttered with so much of unnecessary images, mental images, different perceptions, various precepts. Now, that means mind is fairly clear, clean, clarity is there, and kind of a calmness is there, peacefulness is there. So that is a solution. So therefore, arriving emptiness, achieving emptiness, then becomes a kind of a blessing for one who is properly practicing. Yeah, we can further move, Saman.
Yeah, Bante. The upshot of the above discussion on sunyata would be the revelation that the dialectician, if he seriously intends escaping from all views and concepts, should disown and transcend them to rather than demolish them in toto. As the objects of the sixth sense, concepts are as much as a fact of experience as are the objects of the other senses. Hence, they will continue in the world as worldly conventions in spite of all their flaws and contradictions. The middle path, therefore, consists essentially in the pragmatic approach of choosing and using what is essential for the purpose without attachment. The approach is abundantly clear in a certain criterion which Buddha is seen declaring so often in the suttas. For the purpose of quotation, we may choose the following context, which has a striking relevance to the present discussion. Some things, Pottapada, I have preached and laid down categorically, and some other things non-categorically. And what, Pottapada, are those things that I have preached and laid down non-categorically? Is the world eternal? Is the world not eternal? Is the world finite? Is the world infinite? Is the soul the same as the body? Is the soul one thing and the body another? Does the perfect one exist after death? Does he not exist after death? Does he both exist and non-exist after death? Does he neither exist nor non-exist after death? No, not exist after death. And why, O Pottapada, have I preached and laid down those things non-categorically? Because, Pottapada, these are not calculated to profit, are not concerned with the Dhamma. They do not redound even to the elements of right conduct, nor to detachment, nor to purification from lusts, nor to quietude, nor to tranquilization of heart, nor to real knowledge, nor to insight, nor to Nibbana. Therefore, it is that I have preached and laid down those things non-categorically. And what Pottapada are those things that I have laid down categorically? This is suffering. This, Pottapada, is a thing I have preached and laid down categorically. This is the rising of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. And why, Pottapada, have I preached and laid them down categorically? These, Pottapada, are calculated to profit, are concerned with the Dhamma, redound to the elements of right conduct, to detachment, to purification from lusts, to quietude, to tranquilization of heart, to real knowledge, to insight, to Nibbana. Therefore, it is that I have preached and laid down these things categorically. From this, it appears that the Buddha was sometimes categorical and sometimes not, in preaching or in answering questions, and the criterion is declared to be pragmatic and ethical. The validity of this criterion as regards the Buddha's consistent refusal to give a categorical reply to any of the 10 indeterminate points, Dasa Avvikatavattu, has often been disputed by scholars both ancient and modern. Some, like Professor A.B. Keith, Buddhist Philosophy, page 63, saw in it a general poverty of philosophical constructive power of the part of the Buddha and treated him as a genuine agnostic. Some others similarly convinced that the criterion lacked in depth and cogency proceeded to unravel the secret of the Buddha's silence in regard to the Avyakatas in purely dialectical terms. One of the earliest attempts in this latter direction is to be seen in the Madhyamika system. It is very likely that they succeeded to some extent in unraveling this secret, but it appears that in their enthusiasm to discover the secret of the Buddha's silence, they lost sight of the value of the secret. The value of a secret lies not so much in the secret itself as in the reasons which it is made a secret. In order to find these reasons, one has to retrace one's steps to the above pragmatic criterion given by the Buddha himself. If one needs a deeper evaluation of this criterion, one will get it in the Chula Malunke Sutta of Majjhima Nikaya.
So one moment. Okay. So actually we can take this part next week maybe. So actually it is not that all the questions that Buddha answered, certain questions he kept aside, and they are called indeterministic questions. So there are 10 such questions sometimes people brought to the Buddha. So he kept silent. He didn't go to answer them because he's arguing now these things are not really practically useful to the deliverance, to the understanding, to the freedom from suffering. So trying to figure out the answers for this is a waste of time. Now actually the section that we have to read will cover a kind of a beautiful simile. That is where when someone is hit by an arrow, if that person is telling, okay, I need to find out who has hit me by this arrow. So what is the made of this arrow? So what is the kind of poison included in this arrow? What length it has pierced in the body? And what is the time that he has sent it? From which direction it has sent? So like that, if he is asking all these questions and avoiding any kind of remedy, avoiding taking this arrow out and giving him some proper medication, and he is preventing till he find solutions for all this, I'm not getting the medication, then he is actually a fool. Now, rather than finding all this, he first have to remove the arrow. So this is the type of argument that Buddha is telling. All these 10 questions are not contributing anything towards the Nibbana, anything towards the understanding, anything towards the freedom from suffering. So therefore, he is not wasting time in answering this. Actually, people are more into thinking, more into proliferation, and through their limited capacity of their faculties, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, from their limited experience, they think, they perceive, they think, and they come to conclusions. And now they tell it to the others and try to convince the others. Okay, this is the truth. Everything else is wrong. Everything else is false. So likewise, people are very much like thinkers. They are fond of thinking. They are fond of overthinking. Ultimately, not only they themselves become confused by that thinking, they even impose that wrong thinking into the others and trying them to convince them as well, trying to convince others as well. So that is the problem. So Buddha didn't get trapped by those wrong confusions. So he simply kept them aside. He didn't want to waste his time. He didn't want to answer either. Okay, I think we can stop here. Now we can go for the discussion.
Masarai Swamin Wahanse,
Yeah.
we have 7 questions today. 5 of them are actually from last week.
Right.
So I will start with the ones from last week.
Right.
Question number 1. This is a general question. Dear Bhante, if one is experiencing spaciousness and awareness of a blank state during practice, even for a fraction of a time, can there be any knowing without 5 aggregates? I am just wondering where the form aggregate is when one experiences empty space without any object. Much merits for your guidance. With metta, that's the end of the question.
Yeah, actually, So form aggregate may be there, but you are not grasping it. So as we already mentioned, even today, it is not that we are expecting some kind of an absolute unconscious state. Rather, we are not paying attention to those, and mind is not grasping them. Now, say for example, if the advice given to this Bahya Daruchiri, Ditte Dittamattam Bhavisati, Sute Sutamattam Bhavisati, Mute Mutamattam Bhavisati, Vinyate Vinyatamattam Bhavisati. Even though seeing is there, it is merely seeing. So don't proliferate upon it. Don't think upon it. Don't make something. And don't make a seer. Now, typically what happens is, when we see, we are imposing something. That is what we see. So that is a kind of imposement by the mind. That's a kind of objectification by the mind. And similarly, we are attributing a self into who is knowing this part. So there is a seer. There is someone who is seeing. That's another imposement. That's another attribution of a self into the picture. Other than mere seeing, there is no person who is seeing. There is no thing that someone is seeing. So likewise, this whole process has to be understood in a more causal way. Additionally, introducing a self, additionally introducing likes, dislikes, fabrications, all are unnecessary things that because of our ignorance we introduce to the picture. So when you are meditating also, once you are arriving emptiness, it doesn't mean that you become completely unconscious and do not feel anything. They may be there, sights may be there, sounds may be there, but you are not being disturbed by them. You are not grasping them. Your mind is not sort of influenced by them, but your mind become more independent, more free. And because it is not grasping, it is not dependent on them. Now the anissita, the term anissita, means now mind is not associating them. Mind is not grounded on them. Rather, mind has its freedom. So this is the direction we have to think. We can move forward.
Question number 2 of 7. This is a general question again. Dear Venerable Sir, can you explain what mudita is? Is it possible to cultivate this quality using mindfulness similar to metta? Theruvan Saranai. That's the end of the question.
Yeah, definitely. It may be. You probably have heard about the four Brahma Viharas, Metta, Mudita, Karuna, Upekha. Among them, most popular one is the Metta, where loving kindness. Karuna is the compassion. Mudita is called the altruistic joy. And Upekha is the equanimity. So what is Mudita? Altruistic joy. Now say for example, you have a neighbor. And neighbor is having a better car, more than you. Probably he is more rich. And he's having a better house than you. Or maybe he's having a better occupation than you. Or he's having a better salary than you. He's drawing a better salary than you. So often what happens is we feel envious about it. We feel envious about him. We feel jealous about him. The mudita is the opposite. Suppose that he is also a good person. He is also earning money in a righteous way. And he is really doing well than me even. So, but you are, rather than developing any enmity, you are developing any kind of a jealousy, you feel happy about it. You feel happy on someone's success. So that is called the mudita. And typically what we have is the jealousy, envious, being envy. But what Buddha recommends is having mudita, having altruistic joy, being happy on someone's success, being happy on someone's progress. It could be some material growth, material progress, or maybe spiritual growth. Can one be happy on someone else's growth, happiness? So in the compassion side, actually, it may be easy because when we are developing compassion, the other party is having a trouble. So we are in a better position. So therefore, having some sympathy-based, empathy-based compassion is more possible. But mudita could be more difficult because the other part is better to do level than even us. So at that time, rather than being consumed by kind of an enmity, kind of a jealousy, are we able to have mudita? So that is in a way a bit challenging. But that is something that Buddha invites us to develop. Probably through mindfulness, what we can do is we can recognize whenever the enmity arising or this jealousy arising, and we can abandon that, and then probably we can try to be happy by seeing someone's progress.
Question number 3 of 8. This is a Dhammasaman question. Dear Bhante, I have heard that when you become a stream enterer, you will anyway end up in realizing Nibbana. Therefore, is it sensible to focus on the Dhamma and practice of self-view, which can take us to this goal, rather than aiming big? Thank you for your service, Bhante. That's the end of the question.
Yeah, we can say so, no problem. So, I mean, that could be our aim, a kind of a reasonable aim, because you are quite sure that the Sotapanna, the stream winner, anyway, if he really a Sotapanna, he will definitely succeed. Even without someone's help, he will definitely attain the full enlightenment within 7 lives. Minimum, or rather, the maximum is the 7 lifetimes. Otherwise, even before that, he may be able to understand the full thing. So therefore, being a Sotapanna should be a kind of a goal. Yeah, we can agree with that. So even there, so the 3 fetters are to be abandoned. Sakkaya Ditti, the personality view, Silabbata Paramasa, thinking that the realization or the liberation can happen through by merely following rituals and observances, and then the Vichikicha, different kinds of doubts. Now, anyway, so what is the path to achieve it? So we can say different paths. Now, probably we can promote Satipatthana path. So when one is practicing Satipatthana, so one get a better opportunity to recognize or practically understand the form aggregate, the feeling aggregate, perception aggregate, formations aggregate, consciousness aggregate, because there is the trap. So we are grasping any of these aggregates and preparing ourselves, preparing a Sakkaya Ditti. So more we understand their true nature, then this grasping may be reduced, our delusion may be reduced. So Satipatthana, therefore, we can safely say, is a practical approach to abandon Sakkaya Ditti.
Question number 4 of 8. There are 2 questions which are talking about the same topic, so I'll read them both. The first question is, Dear Bhante, who are the Madhyamikas in today's book reading? And the second one is, Dear Bhante, what are the similarities and differences of Madhyamikas and Hinayana traditions mentioned in the book? Appreciate if Bhante can give a simple introduction to these schools. With metta. That's the end of the question.
Actually, I also have very limited understanding about the Madhyamikas, because this is another very thorough, or rather we can say very comprehensive area for one to study. So I don't have comprehensive understanding about the Madhyamika or the teaching of the Nagarjuna. So I have very limited understanding of this. Through my limited understanding, I can say, so Madhyamikas are the ones who, after the passing away of the Buddha, now you know that in India, so Buddhism somehow faded away, and again the Brahmanism came forward. And again, you know that Shankaracharya, who absorbed the Buddhism into Hinduism by introducing Advaita Vedanta, he incorporated a lot of Buddhist teachings into Advaita Vedanta. So now people can't find much difference. So they see many teachings of the Buddha included in the Advaita. So now things are very similar. Now they can't find whether it is need to become separately a Buddhist or to follow the Brahmanism or now the Hinduism included with this Advaita. Now, therefore, slowly, the Buddhism, or we can say the Buddhist teachings, are slowly neglected or abandoned due to other reasons as well. Now, anyway, the Buddhist teachings are very much like disappeared. Now, on such situation, this Nagarjuna, being a really good scholar and as well as a good thorough monk, so he come up with more a thesis called Mula Madhyama Karika. So that is his particular thesis, Mula Madhyama Karika. So then he introduced particularly cutting off all the Atma-related, self-related views. So it is kind of a blow to the Hinduism, we can say. So those Brahmanical teachings, he made a kind of a blow to this sort of Mula Madhyama Karika teaching. The followers of the Nagarjuna, his students and his followers, they are all called the Madhyamikas. And then the Hinayanis are the Theravadins actually. So Theravada Buddhists typically called the Hinayanists, and they are more into Dhamma. They are particularly getting the teaching of the Theras, the elders, and they are more into that, more in a way we can say more grasping that, and they are considering that as something type of ultimate thing. So the Hinayanists basically have more how to say grasping or attachment towards the Dhamma, towards the teaching, towards the original teaching. So therefore sometimes it also has gone to little unnecessary far, where they are unable to open up, unable to open the mind to some different ways of explanations. Those are not distortions, but different way of explanations of the Buddha's teaching, because they are more adhering themselves to the original teaching, and they are more into the commentary, and they can't go beyond commentary. They can't open up. So therefore, they are called the Hinayanist. So this is a kind of a typical understanding I have with respect to this question.
Thank you, Bhante. Question number 6 of 8. This is again on the Dhamma sermon. Dear Bhante, how does one balance the idea of no self and identify with self in some situations? Example, in the workplace. I recently needed to speak up at work about inappropriate behavior by the manager and explain the impact on the team. It was difficult and not taken well by the manager, with some defensive and aggressive comments being made towards me. I ended the conversation as it was uncomfortable and sought advice from a senior person. In these types of social situations, how can we practice Buddhist concepts and work with others to improve our experiences? With metta, that is the end of the question.
It's a difficult question, by the way. So sometimes this is a kind of a two roles that we may have to play. So if you are an administrator, if you have to play a role, so then we are bound to play that role. So you can't ignore that, you can't neglect that, you can't be negligent of that. So therefore, since we are playing that role, we are paid for that playing role, so we have to play for that. But knowingly playing is the main thing. So when you are given a task, when you are given an administrative role, okay, you are playing it, you are doing it well, and as you said, when it is necessary to sternly tell something, okay, you are sternly telling it. But not with a grudge, not with the inner burning, but some strong voice, some convincing voice. Probably you are passing the message, explaining the truth, explaining the fact in a more convincing way. And we can tell more proper way, like more with a lot of personality. So typically we use the term personality. So we are using the personality and trying to overcome that whatever the wrong view or wrong deed and we are trying to emphasize what we have seen, what we are thinking, and what our view, our idea, we are trying to emphasize. So in such case, very much like we are behaving with a strong self. But on the other hand, the practice has to help us not to harbor that self-view long term, not to harbor that mentality long term. So once we are done the task, then we should be able to come back to the senses, come back to the very relaxed mentality, not holding any grudges, not holding any kind of a friction in the mind. Rather, again, mind is relaxed. Again, mind is peaceful. So it's a kind of a difficult task actually, even though I am telling this, not an easy thing, because how to switch these two modes? In a way, in one mode requires you to be yourself. On the other hand, with the understanding of the teaching, you have to abandon the self, because there is no self. So how to play with the both sides? So this is quite challenging. So Buddha being the teacher, he seems to be done this role really beautifully. Now say for example, when a certain monk misbehave. So Buddha vehemently sometimes criticized that monk. And he probably even put a precept. He even summoned all the Sangha, and he has done that leadership role. So even though he has done that leadership role, but in his mind there is no grudge, there is no anger, there is no self-view. But as the leader, as the spiritual leader, he has done the task. So therefore we can't say that everyone has Buddha's such capacity. We might have to use our own limited capacity. Once the task is assigned to us, so such a capacity we might have to show depending on our ability, and we might sometimes successful, sometimes not successful, depending on our ability to handle it. When the task is there, when someone has to be surrendered, when someone has to be thoroughly convinced, so then we probably have to be stern, we have to use proper terms and strong words, all that are there to convince the others. But on the other hand, quickly switching back to the reality, not being trapped in that state of mind, because we simply played that because it is quite necessary at that moment. Actually, I can remember in certain comments about Ajahn Chah, I can remember some of his students are telling that, certain student monks are telling that Ajahn Chah sometimes blackguard the others. So those students are sometimes being vehemently criticized for their activities, their wrong activities. But at the same time, he quickly was able to come back and behave properly, not harboring any kind of a grudge or anything, not going to any revengeful attacks, but he was fully back to the peaceful state. So therefore, it depends on our capacities, our personalities, our understandings. So all are kind of relative things in a way.
Question number 7 of 8. This is a general question. Dear Bhante, could you please elaborate on avijja paccaya sankhara, i.e. through ignorance, karma formations are conditioned. This explanation of dependent origination seems to be applicable to kamma niyama. How does dependent origination relate to chitta niyama and dhamma niyama? To me, the action of dependent origination applicable to bija niyama and utu niyama seems obvious and quite scientific. Thank you, Theruvan Saranai. That's the end of the question.
So it's an interesting question. I haven't thought about in detail. So kamma niyama, as you know, may be obvious because when avijja is there, ignorance is there, we are preparing a self. We being a self, intentionally we are working, doing something, then we are accumulating karma. That's understood. So your question is what, Chamila? Can you repeat the question part?
How does dependent origination relate to Chitta Niyama and Dhamma Niyama?
Chitta Niyama and Dhamma Niyama. So Chitta Niyama typically say about how the mind is working. So how certain mental patterns are working. So that is in a way Chitta Niyama. So I think Patissamuppada definitely may be able to handle the Chitta Niyama, maybe explaining Chitta Niyama. Anyway, rather than giving you a half answer, I like to explore a little bit about this question. Maybe we'll try to explain that next time. I need some time to little bit explore this question.
Okay, I'll make a note and take it
Yeah,
up.
sure.
Question number 8. This is the last question. We have just about 2 minutes.
Please send me an email also with the same question.
MSI.
Yeah, that.
Question number 8. This is the last question. This is again on the Dhamma sermon. Dear Bhante, during Dhamma discussion, you explained about mind going towards the emptiness. Just for further clarification, is emptiness meant thoughts may appear and disappear, but the mind remains undisturbed and unattached to them? No vitakka vichara. That's the end of the question.
So that's why, I mean, it's also relative. So emptiness is not a fixed state. At one level of emptiness, you still have these wandering thoughts, but you are not being fooled by them. You are not being driven by them. Still thoughts are there, by the way. So the mind is not fully empty of thoughts. But as you continue the practice, there may be instances now no thoughts. You can't find thoughts. Not even the wandering, passing by thoughts. So mind is further in calmness, further in stillness. Now you are in a better state of emptiness. So therefore, use emptiness as a evolutionary type of state, not a fixed type of a state. So we can define emptiness at different levels. So what we are talking is one level, but there may be another better, improved level. In that state, thoughts are almost like absent, but awareness is there. You know that you are living. You can basically understand that the smelling, tasting, touching, hearing, all that are happening, seeing happening. So the six senses are operating. You are not dead, fully aware, but mind is not thinking. Mind is free from thinking, proliferation, and you're not mixing your thoughts, likes and dislikes into the experience. Rather, the mere experience is there. As Buddha explained to this Bahya Daruchirya, mere experience is there. You're not mixing your own fabrications, your own biases, your own prejudices into the picture. So all these different phenomena are coming and going because they are conditioned phenomena. All they are coming and going, but you are dwelling in emptiness. So that's another better state of emptiness. Sharp on time, Chamila.
Yes, thank you, Bhante. We have come to the end of the program today. I would like to make a quick announcement that Bhante is visiting Australia towards the end of this month, and all the programs we hope to broadcast the Q&A and the Dhamma sermon on this channel on the Zoom. But as each of the locations that are hosting the residential retreats do their programs, we'll let you know when those times would be and how you can join. So to end the program, I would first like to thank Bhante for his valuable time in conducting this program, to all the supporters of this program, both seen and unseen, and to all the participants for joining today to practice and present their questions. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thero Saranai.
Thero Saranai.
Thero Saranai.